This episode is brought to you by Progressive Commercial Insurance. Business owners, meet Progressive Insurance. They make it easy to get discounts on commercial auto insurance and find coverages to grow with your business. Quote in as little as 6 minutes at progressivecommercial.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company. Coverage provided and serviced by affiliated and third-party insurers. Discounts and coverage selections not available in all states or situations.
This is Cop Talk, talking crime, cases, and backing the blue. Now, here are your hosts, Captain Ed Mehmet and Detective Kevin Schroeder.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Cop Talk. I'm Kevin Schroeder, your host. I'm here with my co-host, the Good Captain, and today's episode is brought to you by Diana Florence for Manhattan DA. Hello, Captain.
Hello, YouTube viewers and podcast listeners. Here we are again for another interesting session of Cop Talk.
So vote for independent Diana Florence for Manhattan DA. She will prosecute crime and protect our families, not protect the criminals. Vote for Diana Florence for Manhattan DA on the Safer Manhattan line. Welcome, Diana.
Thank you so much for having me once again. I'm thrilled to be back here.
Well, first of all, there's many of our audience know who you are, and I'm sure they're going to vote for you. But the ones who don't, they just tuned in. Could you give them a little bit of your background?
Sure. I'm a 25-year prosecutor, 30-year lawyer. I can't believe it because I feel like I'm still 30, but I'm pretty sure I've not been practicing since the womb.
You look 15.
Thank you, Captain.
You look the same when I had cases with you going back in the late 80s.
There you go. There you go. So I was in the office, the Manhattan DA's office for 25 years. Morgenthau hired me. I've prosecuted every type of crime imaginable, from subway crime, domestic violence, racketeering, you name it. I've done the cases. I'm a lifelong New Yorker, a lifelong Democrat who's running as an independent, but I'm here today because I want everyone to understand that there is a choice, that you don't have to go with the incumbent just because you know his name. I want everyone to know my name, and I also want you all to ask me the tough questions. I'm here because I am the most qualified to be district attorney, and I'm not doing this because I'm a politician. I'm not doing this, because I want to see my name on, papers and on TV. It's because my heart is in public service. My life has been devoted to being a prosecutor and using the law to serve everyone and to do justice. That's what Robert Morgenthau taught me, and that's what I want to do as Manhattan DA.
Captain?
Do you remember, anyway, Frank Hogan?
I remember him, but he's a little before my time. Morgenthau took over in 75, and I'm born in 70, so I just missed him.
Because when I went into the police department, he was the DA of Manhattan.
Yes.
And he was legendary.
He really was. He really was. It's funny because Hogan, one of the things, actually it was Dewey, sorry. But one of the things that the DA's office did that's really impressive when you think about what's happening now is back in the 30s when the Bund, which was the American Nazi Party, they came and they spoke at Madison Square Garden and they tried to promote Nazism here in New York City. And instead of lying down and letting, these sort of really radicals take over, Dewey actually, working with the city, with Mayor LaGuardia, actually prosecuted him, the head of the party, for embezzlement and ultimately got him deported. So, to me, the district attorney's office in Manhattan it didn't just start when I was there. It has a long and amazing history of doing justice the right way.
Let me tell you a little sideline to that.
Okay.
LaGuardia assigned Jewish cops to that detail.
Amazing.
So like it was in your face. I think it was Father Coughlin, who was the leader of the Bund.
Yes.
And he said to prove, what a democracy we are, he assigned the Jewish cops to the detail. Right?
Were you assigned to the detail?
I wasn't born yet. Oh, no, I was born.
Diana, what made you want to run for Manhattan DA?
I'm in addition to being a lawyer, I'm a mom. I've lived in Manhattan for 30 years, and now my kids I have a son and a daughter. My son's 21 and my daughter's 24. they're about the same age that I was when I moved back to New York after finishing my schooling. And, New York is appreciably less safe. Women, are afraid to take the subway late at night. They're, walking on the street. There's a lot more of people that are, very scary out there. And that's not something that we just let go. We, meaning us prosecutors and the police, frankly, back in the day. When I would be taking my kids to PS 116, where I would walk them to school, we definitely, I don't live too far from the Bellevue Men's Shelter. We used to see some people doing some, shady things, but we could call the police and they would respond and the DA's office would prosecute. No longer. Alvin Bragg, on the first day in office, issued the day one memo and said, I'm no longer prosecuting a whole host of misdemeanors. That's not acceptable, and that's not the job of prosecutor. And I just want to restore common sense to that office.
Well, brings me to my next question. When elected, what would be the first business you would take care of?
Really, it's just about going back to the basics, prosecuting crime, rescinding that memo that was so ill-advised. And I cannot believe, after all the pushback and all of what's happened, it still remains on the DA's website. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's when of course that memo would be out the window as well. Correct?
Well, yes, of course. Yes.
I think that'd be once you walk in the door. Here we go.
Yes,
throw that right out the window.
In the garbage. Yes,
absolutely. How many ADAs are there currently right now? Do you know?
Well, there are several hundred. Manhattan is not the largest office. I believe Brooklyn is because.
Okay.
But I also know that there's been a lot of morale, low morale since Bragg took over, and there's a lot of people that have left the office, unfortunately. So that's part of the job. This isn't the exciting part for voters, but part of what to do the job to actually prosecute crime, you obviously need competent lawyers to do so. And it's going to involve recruiting the best people going back out there. And I think someone like me who actually did the work, I stood up in, lobster shift and 1 a.m. to 9 a.m. arraignments. I stood in front of a grand jury. I stood in front of petit juries. I tried, tens of cases. 70 cases. I don't know how many trials I did, a lot in 25 years. And, what I can tell you is that if you work for someone who actually understands the job and has done it, I think that breeds trust, and I think we can rebuild the ranks with the best and the brightest, which is always the thing, the pride of Manhattan. Everyone wanted to work in the Manhattan DA's office. Not right now.
Well, recruitment, I guess, just like the police department of New York City and police departments throughout the country, I'm sure the Manhattan DA's office is having an issue with recruiting as well. Considering Bragg is the DA and the morale is not great.
Yeah, and also he doesn't treat them as prosecutors because they're not supposed to prosecute crime. I've gotten stories from various friends of mine who are defense attorneys and even some friends who are still in the office that they're not supported, that the cases are brought oftentimes for reasons other than justice. And, no one should feel that if they have a different political belief or a different racial skin tone or whatever, if they're different from the people in the office, that they're going to be denied justice. A good example, I'm sure you all followed the case, I believe last month. Well, last month it was made public, but this is a case that's been ongoing since April, of the sucker punch of the pro-life podcaster I believe it was on YouTube. It was live, and I think her name was Savannah Craven, I think was the victim's name. And it was captured live. The defendant punched her in the face. It was a very solid assault 3. We all know that, a misdemeanor assault. And because the DA's office mishandled the case, they mishandled the discovery, the case was dismissed, an open and shut case. So could cases fall through the cracks? Absolutely. But the problem that I see is that if you don't give your prosecutors the tools to prosecute cases appropriately, if you don't professionalize discovery laws are really onerous now. But if you don't give the prosecutors the tools, it's going to fall through the cracks. And you lead people to wonder, would it have happened if it had been a pro-choice person that had been punched? Now you lead people to wonder, is it because of her beliefs that they tanked the case? I don't know that that's the case, but I think that any DA's office that makes the public wonder whether they can get justice if they don't agree with the DA, that's a DA's office that's in real trouble.
What are the chances of overturning the discovery problem? You have, was it 15 days? You have to turn everything over?
Yes. I think, well, there's already been some tweaks to it. And I think, when we go back to when they changed the law, a lot of that was due to, frankly, hubris on the part of one side, right? The DAs didn't think they needed to negotiate, and they left the table. And when you leave the table, who takes up your seat? People that were extremely strident in their beliefs, and they wanted everything, and they got everything. And so they got a law that really made no sense and didn't really correspond to the practical realities. Discovery reform is here to stay, but I think the way that you can change it is you have to do something different than what Bragg and even the other DAs, frankly, have done. What you need to do is you need to start really tracking. There's a guy named Tyreek Martin, and he has 70 different convictions and assaults, and a record as long as your arm, you can imagine. And he has mental issues, and most recently, back in February, he tried to rape a woman and assaulted her very viciously on the subway. Now, this is a guy that, because of his mental issues, was found unfit. But if you understand the law, you know that there are ways to make sure that he gets the correct treatment. You keep it as a felony, for example. You don't reduce it to a misdemeanor, which is what happened in that case. And you basically say, this is a guy that we now need to be tracking, because this is a frequent flyer, right? We know that he's going to be back, and we need to, I'm not saying that we need to do anything to violate his civil liberties. He's got a right like everybody else. But if he violates the law, then we need to be really keeping track of exactly everything that he does, so that we can go to Albany and we can say, listen, this guy, if there were a discovery issue, for example, say, listen, this is a technicality that is denying justice to victims and hurting everyday New Yorkers. So that's where I think you can make some headway. I think the other district attorneys' offices have done a good job of putting the issue forward. But I think the problem is they have not really, Bragg especially, he could have been the leader, but he's felt comfortable just sitting back and just letting things happen. And I think that's because it's not in his interest. He doesn't want to be a prosecutor. He wants to be a social worker. That's what he's been doing.
That's interesting. I would ask you about funding. The DA's office, I understand, is funded by the state. Is that correct?
Well, it's the city budget, I believe, because they go to the city council to get their budget.
Well, that's interesting, because in the past they brought that up as a means, like, if the city is funding the DAs, then candidates for mayor or candidates for other offices can withhold money from them. I always thought it was state funded.
Well, the city council, I know that every year, I remember when Morgan would go in front of from the city council, and part of the pitch that I remember and something that I hold dear was, Brooklyn may have had more residents, but Manhattan, when you count the residents who live, work, and visit Manhattan, we're by far the most. The daytime population swells to maybe 3 times the amount of residents. Right. So I know that it's city council for sure. I don't know. I mean, the mayor, I don't think really can do it. It's really the city council.
But the salaries of the employees are state?
No, the DA's office. It's the DA's office pays the salaries out of their budget. That comes from where? I think the same budget. Yeah. But it's interesting though, in terms of funding, one of the things that changed during the pandemic, around the same wave of criminal justice reform, was asset forfeiture reform. So one of the things that the Manhattan DA's office, we really prided ourselves in, and a lot of the work I did, for 20 of the 25 years, was doing large scale prosecutions against corporate crime, right? Companies that scammed millions of dollars from the city, from different places. And part of what we were able to do is get large forfeiture dollars, right? That we had to, the state took their share. There were different shares that we had to divvy up by law, but the Manhattan DA's office had a large pot of money. And that might be what you're thinking about. Here's the thing though. Albany changed that asset forfeiture law so that now, DAs are disincentivized to get these big forfeitures, because all of it now goes up to the state and very little of it stays with the district attorneys. And that's a huge mistake. And, when Bragg does a lot of these so-called initiatives, what he's doing is he's perpetuating a bit of a fraud because he's using money that was obtained by lawyers like myself under Vance and Morgenthau, and that money is going to run out. So all his programs of watercolors in the park and this and that, those funds are going to run out, and I don't know where he thinks those monies are going to come from. Meanwhile, we're going to have a rampant criminal problem. Our parks are being taken over by people committing petty crimes, and that's not changing. So, to me, asset forfeiture crime, as much as discovery reform and bail reform, we also need to revisit asset forfeiture reform, because we need to incentivize DAs to really go after, corporate fraud and make sure that if companies are cheating taxpayers, that they pay their share.
Diana, what would you say that a case that Bragg did prosecute or did not prosecute that you would have done different? Any particular case that stands out?
Oh, yes.
Many.
Many. But I think, and I mentioned the Savannah Craven case, I would have made, especially, I'll just go back to that one for a moment. That's a case that's high profile, right? And we know right away that given his history, that people were already, when the arrest happened, people were already looking askew at, was he going to do the right thing? And then they dismissed it in July and hid it until September, right? So that is a problem, to be sure. Right. If that case had come across, my desk, right, I may or may not have the same political beliefs as I may be completely aligned. I'm whether pro-choice, pro-life, whatever you believe, right? That would never color it, and I would make sure, especially if I don't believe, I don't agree with the victim, I would make sure that we put extra people on it. We want to make sure that we don't do anything. We cross our T's and dot our I's, because we want to make sure that there's never a question of what we're really pursuing justice, or if we have an ulterior motive. Another case, though, one that I think is even more shocking, is the Tracy McCarter case. And Tracy McCarter was a woman that in March of 2020 stabbed her husband to death. That's a fact. It happened. She was indicted under Vance's office for, I believe, murder in the second degree. She was on for trial in late 22. But during the campaign for district attorney, Alvin Bragg, he tweeted saying, "I stand with Tracy McCarter." Now, that was inappropriate. You should never be commenting on cases that you might be the DA on. Okay, fine. Now, that's a mistake. He made a mistake. Not such a big deal, but not great. But that Tracy McCarter's case was taken up by an entity called Color of Change, which gave Alvin Bragg $500,000, or put $500,000 towards getting Alvin Bragg elected, I should say, to be clear. And then once he was elected, they effectively wanted their pet project to be handled. Now, the case was indicted. It was in front of a judge, a really, really fine judge who actually has written domestic violence treatises. So this is not a judge who is against, doesn't understand domestic violence, things like that. Thing is, everything was done by the book. The grand jury minutes were inspected. The judge said it was ready for trial. The assistant who had handle the case was ready for trial. Alvin Bragg came into court and dismissed the homicide indictment. He was getting pressure from Color of Change. It was all over the news, and he dismissed a homicide indictment, did not allow due process. That's a problem, right? Sure. I mean, when you think about it, I have no idea whether Tracy McCarter actually was justified in what happened that evening, on that horrible evening. No one does, because there was no trial. She could have put forward a self-defense claim, and a jury of her peers could have weighed that. But Alvin Bragg supplanted his judgment from his own. He didn't. It's okay to plea bargain a case. He could have said, "Oh, you know what? We should offer a lower charge." The judge gave him leave to refile charges, lesser charges. Nothing. So as a result, the victim and the victim's child got no justice from the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. That is appalling. That is absolutely appalling. And I'm just shocked, frankly, that I'm the one who has to bring this up. I cannot believe that people are not still taught. I know it's been a few years, but that is appalling.
Yeah. Interesting, Captain.
I was going to ask you about not the funding. Trying to remember. Sorry.
That's all good.
It happens. In the meantime, Diana, how is the campaign going? How is your campaign going?
So the campaign is going amazing. You know, I've been able to go out and speak to a lot of different New Yorkers. I've gotten, we're up to 5 union endorsements, most recently the stagehands, which is so exciting because
I'm sorry, that's this New York City Local 1 stagehands?
Local 1
big union.
stagehands.
Very
and
big,
I'm,
yes.
frustrated. I think if you remember from last time, I wanted to be a singer. So I'm a frustrated Broadway, what could have been.
Right.
So this is about as close as I'm going to get, but I'm thrilled to have their endorsement. And so that's been amazing. And yeah, I mean, now we have, we've just debuted today, my new commercial, just highlighting, that the fact that people don't feel safe, and particularly women and girls in New York, and we need to change that.
Oh, I remember what I was going to ask you.
Here we go. Take 2.
There are rumors going around that Bragg has accepted dark money, like from Soros. Is that true?
Oh, I have no idea about that, but it's interesting because I'm being endorsed. This is sort of exciting by Jim Dolan. And, Alvin has written a lot of emails suggesting that this is somehow sinister. And, Mr. Dolan was kind enough to, be interviewed alongside me in New York Post. And he was very, very funny. And he just said, I'm the secret billionaire. I mean, here I am. I'm not a secret. There's no dark money here. It's all out in the open. The reason that Mr. Dolan is supporting me is, I've got great hair, but it's not my hair. It's because, I've done the work for 25 years, and he's tired, frankly, of people when they go to a Rangers game or a Knicks game, and where his employees are leaving work, that people are harassing and accosting them on 34th Street or 7th Avenue. And that is not the way it used to be. It's only become this way under Bragg. And I'm shocked, frankly. And I said this to him when he first, talked to me about, supporting me. I said to him, well, why don't you just call the district attorney's office and tell them what's going on and maybe work on, something together? This makes perfect sense to me. Madison Square Garden is one of the most, important, landmarks in Manhattan. And he said, it falls on deaf ears. They don't care. And that's terrible. The district attorney's office is supposed to serve everybody.
Very true. Very true. It's, Cap?
Well, she's right. This DA's office should serve everybody. My time, I remember the DAs were extremely active, and they worked very closely with the police. We had very good relationships. I can imagine what it's like today, where the police are looked upon not too brightly by him. Speaking
about stagehands in Madison Square Garden, how about the actual Teamsters?
I'm working on that as well.
Okay.
So Teamsters, I ran actually 4 years ago, and the Teamsters Joint Council has supported me 4 years ago. And unfortunately, it's difficult to, with all the holidays and everything after the summer, right. It's been hard to get everybody focused. But right. I'm hopeful to get some more endorsements.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And I'm assuming you're out there every day, right? At the just like Curtis Lee, you're out there every day.
Yes.
Which is great. You need to be out there. Commercials is great, as you know, but it's good to be out there. Will you be at Madison Square Garden for any Knick or Ranger game? Introducing yourself and shaking hands.
Yeah, I'm hoping to get there. I mean, for now, you can always catch me. I like to go to the different subway stations. I go to Green Markets. Last weekend, I was in Inwood at the Isham Market. I like to do various uptown subway stations. 96th Street on both sides seem to be really busy ones, and give out my pamphlets. Some people yell at me. Lots of people smile. What makes my day, though, is when people, say to me, like, thank you for doing this. I didn't know that there was a choice. And that's just incredible. That's why, when sometimes it's very tough to be a candidate. It's not for the weak-hearted. But when someone stops and just said, I just see you and I appreciate you, it means everything.
Oh, I'm sure.
You brought up earlier, before we had this session, about the the peddling on Canal
Yes.
Street. Is that something you would pursue vigorously?
Yes, it's so interesting because one of the things that we were so proud about when we were in the DA's office is that Canal Street was really cleaned up, and so that local businesses, they're paying rent, people were able to walk into their stores. Now I cannot believe it. It is like, it's 30 years ago. I'm not 25 anymore, but it feels when I walk on Canal Street, it feels just like that. You can barely walk. And one of the things that, it's not, some people say, oh, it's just harmless. It's just fake, it's just fake Prada bags. It's just fake Rolexes. But I know from doing this work that a lot of, when you mentioned the word dark money, really dark and much more sinister money comes from the sale of these counterfeit goods. There's been links to terrorism, human trafficking. This is not a nice business, and we do need to prosecute it. We need to make sure that that the law is being followed, that we don't just sort of surrender our streets to crime, even low-level crime.
Well, a similar situation exists on 14th Street and probably on some of the other streets uptown.
Yes.
Canal Street.
Yes.
All over.
Yeah. Oh, no. And
Times
it's
Square.
obviously not just for Canal Street. It's just that Canal Street was the one I saw the most because that's where, that's the subway stop that I would get off to go to work for 25 years. But you're right. Unlicensed vending is a problem,
Right.
And it's not fair. It's not fair to our local businesses or frankly national businesses. If they're paying rent, they should be.
That's a big problem for John Catsimatidis,
Yes.
who has the stores.
The
supermarket.
Christie's, yes.
He's been complaining for years about the peddling outside in front of his stores. They undercut his prices, and it's a big thing, and no one really enforces it.
Yeah, and look, like I said, it's not, I'm not here to, I always say, it's not Les Miserables. I'm not looking to send people to jail for a loaf of bread for a year. That's not what this is about. But it is about, we don't pick and choose and say we're only going to prosecute, a misdemeanor if it has these attributes. That's what Alvin Bragg did in the Day One memo, and we're all living the consequences. There is a reason now that when you get off the subway, I was there a couple weeks ago on Canal Street, and I got off the subway, and it took me 5 minutes to go a block because it was wall-to-wall people, between, the blankets of goods, the tourists, the people that were looking at things. You could not walk. That's not okay. I saw the stores were empty, but the streets were clogged. We can't do that to our residents and our business owners. It's just not right.
Diana, what's your opinion? You live in the city of New York,
Yes.
obviously you live in Manhattan. What's your opinion on the upcoming New York City race for mayor?
Yeah, I think that it's going to be an interesting one. I think it's interesting that, Mayor Adams dropped out. I think that it's right now, I suppose it's anyone's race. I think Sliwa, Cuomo, and Mandami. To me, I don't want to make an endorsement. I want to talk about specifically who I'd vote for because I don't think that that's my job. And frankly, they're not endorsing me. So, and we can talk, guys, if you want to talk. But, I will say this, though. I think that it is important, as someone, and I think talking to you guys especially, right? I'm going to be 55 next week. Did the work for 30 years. And to me, experience matters. Doing the work matters. And I think that that's something that New York should value, looking at people, looking at people's resumes and seeing what they've done and as opposed to making promises whether or not they can or can't do it. So to me, I have to figure out who I'm going to vote for. I have not decided yet, but I can tell you as district attorney, regardless, I can work with whomever is mayor. And it's important. I'll just say this. Whoever wins, you want a district attorney that's really strong, because if the front runner, which is Mamdani, if he does win and Bragg is the DA, I think that we are going to see more, not less, of the extreme decriminalization policies that we're living with now.
Oh, we totally agree with what you just
Mamdani
said.
says he wants to do away with misdemeanors.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, he can't do that. The good news is a lot of what he's sort of known for, he can't do unilaterally, but still, it's not a good perspective. If that's your perspective going in, that's not great.
Yeah, but that's part of the plea bargaining process. If you can't plead down to a misdemeanor, what are you going to plead to?
Sure.
Right?
Exactly. I guess you go right to violation. But I mean, to me, the thing is, it's interesting because you guys know from doing the work, right? Sometimes a police officer will make a felony arrest and we as a prosecutor say we can't prove it, right? We think it's a misdemeanor. You guys might take issue with that. But ultimately, we come together and we're trying to figure out what we're going to win on, right? Ultimately, that's what ultimately I never had a problem with my police partners because they knew that I'm not anti, doing the cases. I just wanted to bring the best case I could. Now the problem is it's not being done based on the evidence or the facts or the victims. It's being done by Bragg and his ideology, and that's wrong. And that really makes the victims second-class citizens to defendants. Defendants do have rights, but so do victims.
Right. I mean, the ADAs, the stories I hear nowadays is that a lot of the DAs throughout all the boroughs, but Manhattan especially, the ADAs, when they're speaking to the police officer or the detective to draw up the case, right away they want to downgrade everything.
Yeah.
Everything's like, like you said, of course you need the evidence. We understand that. But they just want to downgrade everything for any excuse they could find. And the detective's like, you kidding me? Really, you kidding me? But we know where that's coming from. That's coming from Bragg.
Yeah, it's bad that it's coming from the top. I can tell you in 25 years in that office, I never had a directive saying write cases up as lower than what they are. And I'll tell you a funny story. I don't know if I talked about this last time. I did a very complex case involving the trafficking of high-end motorcycles and then guns to the Caribbean. So what the guys were doing, the groups, and they were all over the city. It was a citywide racketeering case. And what they were doing was they were literally taking orders, actually. So it's like, I want a, purple Ducati, 2012 or later. And then they would literally drive around and find it. They go in Soho or wherever. And then they would dismantle it, put it in containers and send it out to the Caribbean. So how I got that case, I think, and I always think this is really interesting, to sort of understand, it wasn't a summary arrest. Well, it was, but it wasn't in Manhattan. It was actually in Brooklyn. And in Brooklyn, they were handling it one way. They basically handled it as a standalone. And that was fine. It was reasonable. They charged the guy with one felony. But that guy was really mad, that he'd been put in this position. He was a mechanic, and he didn't want to lose, his ability to make a living. So he approached actually the sergeant, now my sergeant, on the case, and he said, "Listen, this is way bigger than me." The Brooklyn ADA, who was great, he was a young guy. I think he was like a second or third year. He's like, "This is above me. I can't really do it." And so this sergeant had once had a case with my bureau, which was the Rackets Bureau, where my task force lived. I was the chief of the construction for a task force. I had no business doing a gun or a motorcycle case. But what happened is he cold called my office. And because I think my name, Diana, was maybe the top of the alphabet, they transferred it to me. Do you know it ended up being a 30 defendant racketeering case? We did a wire for almost a year. We recovered 40 motorcycles, 35 defendants. It was an incredible case. Went to trial, got convictions, even got an award from the federal law enforcement. I was the federal prosecutor of the year. I was not even a federal prosecutor. All from this case. Really not about me, because that wasn't the point of that story. Really, the point is, cases can start, as you guys know, with like a little nothing thing, and they can grow if you have a lawyer, right? And you have a police officer who are just doing their job, following the evidence. What you just described, right? Detectives are saying, I'm bringing these cases and they're just downgrading them. That's not right. That's not where our job is supposed to be. And that's coming from the top. And that's why, frankly, DAs, ADAs are leaving, because that's not why we went to law school. That's not why you go and you work in public service. Lawyers can make more money leaving and going to the private sector, but you do the job. And I would be privileged to get back there and make less money. I'm happy to do that because it's what I want to be.
Just to rewind. So Diana, when you were in the Manhattan DA's office a few years back, do you know how many ADAs there were at the time? Approximate?
I was trying to remember. I can't remember if the office had 500 people and it was 300 lawyers, or it was 500 lawyers and then maybe the office was 800. I feel like there was a 300 delta, but I might be adding too many lawyers. Apologies.
So it's probably half of that today.
Oh yeah, whatever it is, it's a whole lot less.
Absolutely, yeah.
And people don't, whenever you talk, I'm sure you've seen this. Anytime you've ever talked to a former Manhattan DA, my husband was one of them. He was in the office for 3 years in the 90s, and he's a big deal. He's a lawyer now. He's at a big firm, and he always says, "Best job I ever had." Best job I ever had. And it was. And whether you stay for 3 years, which is the minimum time, or you do it for 25, every lawyer should feel like that was the greatest thing that they ever did, because you're serving the public. You're serving the people of New York. And that's why I'm running. That's why I want to get back there, because Alvin Bragg has squandered that opportunity.
Well, hopefully it will again when you win. Manhattan
Thank you.
DA.
I hope so.
Captain?
Well, I think this is a great interview, and I think you'll be a good district attorney.
Thank
And
you.
we have to get rid of Bragg, because I live in Manhattan, and I'm suffering like everybody else from his policies.
I appreciate it. Thank you for the words of encouragement and support.
Diane, if anyone would like to get in touch with you or donate or volunteer for your campaign, how could they go about that?
Yes, my website, just go right on my website and there's a volunteer button. My website is Diana, www.diana, DIANA, forda.com. It's diana4da.com. And please reach out. I would love to see all of you. Even if you can't volunteer or donate, just come over and say hello or send a word of encouragement. It's always a pleasure.
Well, thank you, Diana. You've been a great guest today. We wish you luck.
Thank you.
Hopefully we'll have you on once again right before the election day.
I'd love that.
And until then, good luck to you.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank everyone for listening to another episode of Cop Talk. You can follow us on at Cop Talk WABC. That's at Cop Talk WABC. And until next time, God bless you, God bless America, and God bless law enforcement throughout the world.
And don't forget, this will be on YouTube.
Thank you.
Thank you.